I've been fortunate enough to work on many different projects, and I think that's basically the strength of the feature set to the final inventions, essentially. I've worked on everything from the roller wheel and computer mouses, most fuel dispensers. You put gas in your car, use an essential piece of hardware I developed there. I've done a lot of automotive work, a lot of white goods work, much defense work. And basically, when you work in all these different industries with all these different inventions, you basically take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and they wouldn't necessarily have been used in that combination before, but having all the experiences in the different industries allows you to kind of reassemble the blocks a little bit more effectively and to come up with some unique devices.
And this seems to be the best product out there on the market today.
It truly is. When we originally started down the path of this white box here, we really didn't intend for this to end up exactly how it was. At the time, we were doing a lot of work with some of our transit customers, and they're looking for some way to get people back inside their train cars and buses. So we took a look at all of the main disinfection technologies that were available at the time. And basically there's a lot of sprays out there. There was a lot of different type of ionization and ozone type devices. And UVC was one technology we looked at. At the time though, UVC was primarily generated with an old school tube, much like an old neon light bulb type tube. And that technology has been used in hospital operating rooms for disinfection for several decades. But the problem with those tubes is that even though they're extremely useful, they were, A, they don't last very long, they last about 6 months or so. B, they emit ozone, which is a cancer-causing gas, basically. And C, they just weren't very cost-effective as far as how they operated. Typically UVC in particular, if you're a ½ inch away, you may end up with one value, like the 100% value. If you're 8 feet away from a UVC light source, you're only getting 1.4% of the light source. So you have to be extremely close to the light for it to do any good. So originally we developed some surface type units, and naturally with a surface type unit, where the infrared lights on the outside of the unit, nobody else can be in the area while the unit is operated. So that's kind of how we started down this path. And then shortly thereafterward, people, the CDC especially, they come up with guidance that it's not really surfaces necessarily, it's really airborne and aerosolized issues were the primary cause of this spread of the virus. So right away, I basically took a look at my device and I'm like, we got to turn this thing inside out now. So
nice.
Essentially what we did was we started to utilize a different form of UVC light, and that's LEDs. And much the same way that LEDs have taken over from incandescent bulbs, LEDs have also taken over in several different types of industrial light, UVC being one of them. It's a relatively new product, but what it allows us to do is basically flatten the light source. So inside this box, there's a disinfection chamber, and essentially that light is a large section of the inside of this panel. So the other thing we have to do is we have to make sure the air is very close to those light sources. So the panel has to be a certain distance away, disinfection channel has to be a certain depth, and the third element of all that is as the air comes across the LEDs, it can't come across too fast, because if it does, it's not going to get the dosage it requires. So that requires a specific fan speed, and it requires a specific proportion of the disinfection channel itself. And third, you have to make sure that the device is safe. So basically what we have is the air comes into the device here, goes through the disinfection chamber, and then over here we have baffles, which basically act as a light trap. And this is one of our patents we have in this device, is that light trap. So essentially air comes out of it, but the UVC light is trapped inside the device itself. So I don't know of any other company that's strictly relying on UVC for air purification at this point.
Okay.
And it's not just the UVC, it's really the airflow itself. Most air disinfection machines do not put out the right amount of air. Right now, this is our smallest unit. It's putting out 65 CFM. So if you do the math and you figure out how long it takes 65 CFM in a 12 by 12 foot room, it basically will do 4 air changes per hour in that type of room. So that's really what you want. You want disinfection, and you also want the air moving in the room itself. If you notice, this device has the air turning 90 degrees. So it comes in through the front and it comes out the side. And the primary reason for that, again, is to bolster that circulation in the room. A lot of the low-cost HEPA filters, for instance, I won't name any names, they have extremely low airflow. Some of them are as little as 2 or 3 CFM. So is that filter actually working? It's probably working in a very small area necessarily, and it's not going to be, very effective in a large room like that. Historically, how people have been filtering air are using things such as HEPA filters. And all a HEPA filter is it's a very high grade, paper filter, which basically filters out these pathogens. HEPA filter's got a couple disadvantages though. It's been around for a long time, a lot of different companies make them, but the virus itself is, as far as the size of the virus, it's 1/10 of a micron. HEPA filters don't filter that small a device, so they're typically 1/2 a micron or so. So that's number one. Number two, a HEPA filter also, in addition to that 1/2 micron size, it captures water molecules. And once you have a filter media where you're capturing, all these things, everything from mold spores to COVID-19, water molecules, it basically develops into this kind of toxic soup, okay? And HEPA filters work very well for a very short period of time. Once that filter starts getting clogged, and it gets clogged fairly quickly because it's such a fine mesh in there, you need to change that. A lot of the manufacturers say you change it every 6 months or so. If you look at studies, the studies show you need to change it every 3 to 4 weeks, essentially, for that thing to be really effective.
And there's no way that someone, whether it's at a high school, whether it's a city hall, they're going to be on top of this.
They're not going to be on top of it. How do you track it? If you have a large school with 500 classrooms, how do you, by the time you get to the last one changing the filter, you're back at the first one again. So how do you maintain that record keeping? It just seems very, logistically very difficult thing to do.
That's incredible that they would think that they're going to stay on top
Right.
of it. And what would you say, Rick, what would you say to, say, a mayor, a town manager, a selectman, a counselor, an alderman, a principal, or a superintendent of a school? These people, in a way, are responsible
Right.
for many lives.
Right. And that's not necessarily just the logistic end of it. How would you like to be the actual poor person who is cleaning that filter out, which has got live
point.
coronavirus in it?
Yeah.
And then what do you do with that filter? Do you treat it as a toxic waste item?
Right.
What do you do with it?
Yeah, should you be wearing a hazmat suit?
Exactly.
Oh,
So
incredible.
those are some of the things that, if you look at traditional air filter technologies, that I would ask the question of. A device such as this uses no filters. We're doing all of our disinfection using UVC right now, and basically it's just a flow-through design, and there's zero maintenance on it. So you turn it on, it's going to last from 5 to 7, 10 years even, and you don't have to do anything to the device itself.
I know there's different sizes. One, which is the largest, it provides for 10,000 square feet.
Yes.
Am I right on that?
Correct.
How big is that unit?
That unit is about 44 inches tall, and it's about 14 inches square.
So that would cover an auditorium and then some.
It would, yes, absolutely.
Great. Let me ask you something. This unit, it's good for COVID. I went out recently and I had my vaccine. There were side effects.
Right.
Wear your mask, take the vaccine. Is that foolproof?
Nothing is foolproof, as is, this whole COVID situation has taught us. The one thing that to keep in mind is basically this box works by taking UVC light, and it basically breaks down the genetic chain of living objects. And it basically gets inside the RNA and DNA, and it basically makes it so that the virus cannot replicate anymore. So essentially the virus dies. We test this device using a surrogate virus because no test lab allows you to use live COVID-19 virus. So we use it with a virus called MS2. The MS2 virus is up to 40 to 50 times more resistant to UVC than actual COVID-19. So all of our testing and all of our results are based on a virus that's many, many times more robust than the COVID-19 virus. And why that's important is, in addition to COVID-19, a device such as this will take care of things like flu viruses. It'll take care of mold spores. It takes care of pet dander. Basically anything that's alive or is protein or a nucleic acid, this device will basically destroy those type of operations. So beyond COVID, there's many other uses for a device like this. But even back to COVID, everything that I've said says there's going to be variations of this, which happen
Right.
year by
That's
year
what I'm
by
hearing.
year.
Yeah.
And you don't have to basically reprogram this. It operates in the optimum wavelength. It's about 265 nanometers. And that's kind of a sweet spot for destroying almost all pathogens such as this. Right.
So if there's a city hall, let's say in the city of Peabody,
Mm-hmm.
and I grew up in Peabody, or in the city of Woburn where I live right
Sure.
now, where should these be? How many there should be in a city hall where there might be 25 to 30 rooms in a city
So
hall?
you always want to maximize the effectivity of an asset like this.
Okay.
So basically what we recommend is that they go into places where the most people are, essentially. So
Right.
conference rooms, meeting rooms, lobbies, things of that nature.
Auditorium in the sense of Peabody and Woburn, they both have auditoriums.
Correct. How I think we need to look at air disinfection in the future is, 20 years ago, not many homes had water filters in them.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, 8 out of 10 homes have water filters in them. And we believe it's going to be the same way with air quality also. Because one thing these units will do is, for instance, we have some hotels that are looking, a hotel goes in a room after a guest leaves, they wipe down all the surfaces, but they basically leave the room for anywhere from 3 to 30 hours to make sure that all the virus in the air settles down. What we're doing with some hotels is we're basically selling them those big tower units that they roll into a room. They could turn on that big tower unit and in 2 minutes destroy everything in the air in that room. So why shouldn't you disinfect the air much like you disinfect surfaces? It's just as important, if not more important, and I think that's the habit that we're going to have to get into.
It's a great way to fight COVID. I would take a guess it's a great way to fight the flu. Strep?
Absolutely.
What are some of the other things? I'm thinking
And
these should be in every single hospital room.
anything you
Staph
can imagine.
infections. How about with a staph infection?
Absolutely.
So this is
TB,
basically
everything.
This can do it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why don't people know about this?
It's a relatively new product. This product did not exist 6 months ago. So that's why we're having this nice conversation right now, Gary.
That's great, folks. It's way clear. So if you were going to say exactly what it is, you got that 15-second elevator. Well, we'll give you 30 seconds. The
Okay.
30-second elevator pitch to people that are concerned with their kids, or should be concerned with the well-being of an entire community. What do you say to them, Rick?
We basically say there's a device that's available that'll make sure and ensure that the airflow, the air within a room is free of pathogens. It's a germicidal disinfection system. There's no materials, there's no filters, there's nothing to clean up afterwards, there's no residue from anything else. It just sits there and works. And this unit actually is operating right now, and you can hear how quiet it is.
Yeah, it's very quiet.
Right.
It's actually kind of soothing. I can go to sleep to it.
You could. You absolutely could. The other thing we include on these units is these two LEDs here, basically. With a unit like this, how do you know the UVC is actually on within the device itself? So basically the blue light here, there's 48 individual LEDs in here. So basically if one of those LEDs goes out, this blue light goes out and you know about it. And then the green light is for the fan and everything else. So there's all full self-diagnostics. There's only one switch, you turn it on. There's really no operating manual because there's nothing to do with this device. It's very simple, much like an Apple type device.
What are some of the other advantages? Because I know people out there are going to be very much interested.
The big advantage is how scalable the design is. Even though we've got several different standard models, if we have a situation with an unusual room, maybe the configuration of the room is a little bit strange, the orientation, the ceiling height, things of that nature, we can very easily put together a custom unit for these applications too, which I haven't seen any of the other manufacturers willing to do that yet.
I don't know whether we want to get into it or not, but price point, because obviously cities, communities, price should be no object whatsoever. I
Right.
think the health
Right.
and the well-being of the public,
Yeah,
the citizens.
there's several things that go into price, obviously. The purchase price, but it's basically, you got to look at your consumable price. How much does it cost to hire somebody to replace all those filters? How do you inventory those filters? You got to order them all the time. So if you look at the total cost of owning a device like this, we feel it's much less expensive than some of the, initially less expensive HEPA type devices, absolutely.
Much less expensive and much more effective.
And lasts much longer. I don't see many people sit up here and say their device is going to last for 5 to 10 years. The WayClear type device comes in where if you put this on a wall in a room or in a shelf in a room and let the device run, basically when you walk into that room, regardless who's been in the room, you can ensure yourself that you're walking into a room where the virus in aerosol form is going to be either eliminated or greatly reduced within that space itself. For instance, back when COVID was initially going through, nursing homes and, real people with some compromised situations, if you would have had this device in those type of environments, we believe things would have been much better off.
Where do you see viruses most often popping up? In a nursing home?
I mean, viruses are every place, but where it's important is when the virus is in a place where it can't escape necessarily. So in an enclosed space like a nursing home or an assisted care facility, there may not be great circulation within that space itself. So you really need something else to bolster the protection in an area such as that.
Chickenpox, measles, strep, staph, anything of the like. How does WayClear work on that?
Well, that's the beauty of having a true germicidal system. UVC is just as effective with viruses, with odors. Anything that's alive, the UVC technique, disinfection technique, will be just as effective at that. It's unfortunate that COVID is here today. The COVID that's here tomorrow, the COVID that's here in 10 years, this device will take care of those potential new strains also. In addition to this basic flu and influenza, things of that nature. So much like almost every home in America now has some sort of water filter in it, we believe that air filtration is going to be just as important, if not more important, than water filtration, through this whole COVID pandemic. And that's something that I really feel is going to change.